Hey guys, what's up here? Mikey with 303 Mobile Welding, and today I wanted to talk about what makes a rig welder. So a rig welder encompasses basically a lot of different things. We have a rig which has all the tools, materials, consumables, everything on us, and then we go to the job, we perform the task, and we leave and we take all of our equipment with us. So there's two types of rig welders that you're going to see. The common form that you see is somebody who has a flatbed, maybe a custom welding bed, whatever. They're going to have a larger machine, and they're going to be kind of somebody who can do pretty much everything. Odds are they've pipelined in the past. So we've got the pipeliner here. Okay. The next one that you have is your structural guys. Not sure on the spelling, so just FYI, my spelling's terrible. Okay. And then the other one is general. Okay. So a rig welder for these are kind of the three main categories. Is you have the pipeliner, you have the structural, and the general. So the general does pipe, does structural, repairs, possibly maintenance, and we'll say ornamental, and this is / railing. Okay, because a lot of structural guys don't like to do railing, and it's just because it usually involves some sort of type of circular welding. So you're welding upside down, things like that, and you're also usually using really small stuff. You know, you're not really blowing through it, 045 or higher wire for handrail. So most of the time you're doing like 030 or 035, and it's also MIG most of the time. You can, in the field, you'll do Fluxcore, but if there's no wind or anything like that, you can totally get away with MIG welding. A lot of it's short circuit MIG welding too. All right, so for the structural side, you obviously have you've got heavy iron. The next one that's probably the biggest for the structural is they're used to doing, they look at plans. So they're a plan expert. Okay. I would say that's probably kind of an overall theme, is that we need to be able to read blueprints. But in the structural world, it's really important. The reason being is because you got to be able to know how to read different types of weld diagrams, which I will do a video on how to do that, what to look for. And then also too, you have to be able to kind of see and move on the fly. So like in pipeline, you're building to a schematic or a blueprint that's got, it's got to be built a certain way because that gas has to flow a certain way. With structural, what ends up happening is you'll come in and you've got 30 different types of contractors there. You've got D1 all the way up through, like D9 there. So you've got basically the concrete guys, you've got the foundation guys, you've got a lot of dirt work guys. You've got, let's see what else. You've got the steel erectors themselves. You got the iron workers there, and then the welders kind of fall in on that category there. And then as you move up, you've got the sliding guys. You've got insulation. You've got electrical. There's like a lot of other things that go into it, and as a result, structural welders have to be able to communicate with all types of contractors. So I would say communication is key here. Okay. So that's kind of the thing there. Let's see what else. They're used to, working at heights. And large welding machines. And I would say Fluxcore expert. The reason being is we've seen a shift from stick welding to Fluxcore in the structural world, and the reason that is just it goes faster. You don't use as many consumables. The only downside of it that I've seen recently is Fluxcore has a tendency to hide welds that are bad. And what I mean by that is I've literally seen welds that look amazing on the outside, but we've done weld break tests with them and it just snaps. And I mean, literally with little to no pressure on it. And okay, so the first thing you're thinking is the polarity correct? Okay, or the polarity is correct. Okay, is it something with the machine? What's going on? Is it constant current? Is it constant voltage? Is the wire feeder set up? There's a lot of different variables that come into that, and I think that's probably the biggest thing with Fluxcore is that you get guys who can short circuit mid, so they automatically think that they can go and do Fluxcore out of a wire feeder, but it's a little different. You've got to set your amperage, or you got to set your voltage, and then you have to set your wire speed correctly. And there are calculators from Miller and Hobart and all that will tell you what you need to set your machine for in order to do that. However, the downside of it is you get guys that go and take a Fluxcore test on one particular machine, and then they go to a completely different machine and a different suitcase on another job, and they may not know how to set that up correctly. So you get really crappy welds, and that's where you'll see those like Instagram photos of really crappy structural welds, and you look at it and you go, oh, it's totally Fluxcore, and it just went horribly wrong. And that's because they didn't know how to set up the machine for that. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I see with Fluxcore, is that Fluxcore is a problem. It is one of those things that's really good in the field if it's done correctly, and if it's done, or you have somebody who's not really experienced in it, meaning that they're certified in it because they went to a weld test and they didn't have to bring their own machine. They used an in-house machine that was already set up. Let's say for 045 wire, you're set at like 18 volts. You had basically a 170 wire speed, and everything's all set up, and you're running it, and world's great, 3/8 place test, boom, done, right? Then you go out into the field and you're welding 1/2 plate, and you're using 052 wire or 1/16 or something crazy, other types of wire, and you're like, okay, well, I've never welded with that. And also too, you welded on like a Miller 8VS, which is what I carry, and out in the field, the guy that you're welding with or whatever is using an LN25, and you're just noticing that it's spattering and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and the welds just look like crap. There's no penetration there. That's where the Fluxcore kind of thing is kind of a problem in the structural world. And then obviously, they're using 5/32, 70/18 is the standard rod. I would say 5/32 and, or 1/8. Okay. Those are the big things in the structural world. The other thing too is that they're used to welding over paint. So you're going to run into places in the structural world, if you become a structural rig welder, or you are, that eventually you're going to run into either pre-engineered buildings or beams that are already set in place and have been sitting out because of COVID, the job sat still for a while or whatever. There's going to be a lot of rust and paint, so you're going to have to know how to deal with that, whether you're wire wheeling it off, you're physically grinding it off. You also need to understand that just grabbing a bigger rod and running a higher amperage doesn't necessarily make a solid weld. Just because it looks okay doesn't mean it is okay. So that's kind of the biggest thing. And then the last one, which is the one that everybody knows about, right, is the pipeliner welder. So this is somebody who is, works in hot condition. I would say hot outdoors. And that's kind of true for all all the welders, but it's really, really a thing in pipeline. Is you're working outdoors, it's hot, it's windy, you don't have a lot of coverage, you're basically in the desert. The next thing is usually a custom bed. Older welding machine. You are seeing a lot more people go to like the Miller 400 Pi Pro 400, which I have a video on. and you know, and like the SA 300s, SAE 300s. Sometimes you see the MPs in there. But the biggest thing is that what you want for pipeline is you want something that's going to do 100% duty cycle for 12 hours a day, every day, no matter what. You're not going to run out of fuel, and it's just going to work for you. And you can control the arc really well. It's got a remote. You know, this also too. The pipeliner is used to running a remote. Okay, I would say in structural you do see the remote in there every now and then, but for the most part they kind of set it and forget it. In the general side, you definitely have people who can run a remote. I'm gonna put here if it don't roll, don't get welded. Okay. So I would say pipeliners are pretty big on, you know, wanting to do pipe, always welding pipe. They don't really like doing a lot of structural. So that's kind of the biggest thing. A lot of them do structural, but they would prefer to weld pipe. And so they're used to working in that 5G, 6G position, out of position welds, or doing everything off of a rollout wheel. That's kind of one nice thing about the pipeliners is they are really good about running the rollout wheel. So these are your 3 rig welder categories that you have. And those are kind of the biggest points that stand out between the 3. The general is, you know, they carry over from the pipeline side. Sometimes pipeliners will become a more general welder, so they'll do fabrication, they'll do repairs, maintenance, things like that when they're not actually working pipeline, especially with COVID happening, or when COVID happened. And the shutdown happened, and now we're starting to see that again, and it's a really kind of hard thing to deal with. So general welders usually encompass somebody who has either started out in welding or has transitioned out of one of these sections back into just kind of a general thing to build their own business. A lot of self-started businesses like my company 303 Mobile Welding, I started out as a structural welder and only doing structural, and then I kind of moved into a more general because I realized you can't run a business solely on structural welding. It's not really possible. So those are the things. This is another thing here is hourly, hour pay versus project pay. Okay, what I mean by that is sometimes you'll run into jobs where you get paid per the hour and that's what you bill. Some jobs they want a full hard estimate. Boom, right now I want to know exactly what this is going to cost, 10 grand, whatever, and that's what you have to bill at. And so if you go over that, you're eating it, and that's kind of your own problem. So that's why I was saying, like, the general is kind of really good at everything around, but they kind of have haystack knowledge, which is where they have, you know, 3 haystacks worth of knowledge in a lot of different categories for welding, but they don't have silo knowledge where, you know, it's just basically a super deep knowledge of whatever that particular part of welding is. So a lot of general welders are usually people who are starting up, or they are people who have done only pipeline and are trying to get into the structural side, and so they're going to have a little bit of learning curve getting in there. Same thing with structural, whatever. And you know, some people on YouTube or whatever comments are going to say, "Oh, Mike, you know, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know, pipeliners are good at everything, blah blah blah." I guarantee you that if you came to a job and from running from pipe, which, you know, can be a slammed up gap, to, you know, every now and then you do run into some big gaps. In structural, you're always running into gaps. Always. Okay. Nothing ever fits together because you're building these giant structural sections, and sometimes the foundation can be off. Sometimes the anchor bolts aren't in the right place and you got to move a column a foot. You know, that's a huge amount of weight and iron that you're moving. Just a foot is crazy to be able to even do. And so that's something that I think a lot of people kind of overlook in the structural side. All right. So that's kind of what Rig Welders are. So hopefully that gives you guys kind of a rundown. If you have any comments, questions, whatever, leave them in the section below, and then don't forget to subscribe and like to watch for more content. Thanks, guys.